Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is the Ministry of Arts podcast, where each week I'll be speaking to a different artist. Now let's begin by bagging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello, and welcome to episode 215 of the Ministry of Arts podcast. Well, this weekend we lost Australian comedian Barry Humphries. He was another one that scared the interviewers because they was never too sure what he was going to do next. I was working in a club in Essex when I was about 24, 25. It was a cabaret club back when cabaret was a thing. Over the course of a month, you'd have like a Temptations one night, and then Freddie Starr the next, Billy Connolly, then the Chippendales, and then, when he was visiting our shores, Dame Edna Everage, which was, if you're not aware, Barry Humphries' alter ego. If you go over to my Mizog Art account on Instagram, you'll see a photo I just put up of me and Barry Humphries as Dame Edna. Fresh-faced and in my mid-20s, looks like we're going out on a date. At the end of today's episode, there will be a short message on how you can support the podcast via Patreon. So if you like what you hear and you think you might want to help keep it going, then yeah, pop over there. It's the price of a cup of coffee per month. And if not, that's absolutely fine. This content is free for everybody. A couple of weeks ago, I was invited down to HMP Lewis, which is just outside Brighton, to do a talk and creative workshop with the guys in there on behalf of Penned Up, which is a literature festival for prisoners. Amazing, right? I gave a talk about my journey from prison to artist and how the Sensations exhibition was a turning point for me all the way back then. I told them how I discovered and started to slightly understand the workings of conceptual art. And then at the end of the talk, set them a task of creating their own conceptual artwork. And obviously they haven't got the materials, so it was literally just writing down what they would create if they were able, and a few little sketches on the side. And then last week I'd done the same talk and showed the outcomes at the All Saints Art Centre in Lewis. It was a really good way of showing people on the outside of the wall some of the positive things that those on the inside of the wall get up to. And in the audience was good friend of the podcast, Alice Mara. Thank you very much for coming along, Alice. And then just a couple of days ago, prison related again, I guested on the amazing Life After Prison podcast. It's hosted by Zach and Jules, who have both got a lived experience of the criminal justice system. The guests speak of their experiences within prison and more so how they were preparing for release and what happened thereafter. So it's a very positive podcast. Go and give them a follow on Instagram. But anyway, back to this week's episode 215. Well, today, episode 215, we have Ant Hamlyn. We'd followed each other on social media for a while, and then I was lucky enough to be showing with Ant at Fort Stavry's factory project in, I think it was the summer of 21. It was the first time I'd seen his work in person. And I know it's obvious, but the photographs of his work really do him no justice. He makes sculptures out of the same material that bouncy castles are made of. And they're created in such a way that they could inflate. Some actually do. But his are shown as sort of deflated inflatables. But less of me telling you all about his work. Let the man do that himself. So please, come with me as I spoke to sculptor Ant Hamlyn. Where are you based?
I'm based in Kingston.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I've just moved here actually. I was based before in Acton. I had a studio in Acton, well, Park Royal, and now I've got my studios in Kingston. It's basically just behind town, like about a 10-minute walk from the station. There's a big park called Fairfield Road, and it's just literally behind there. Do you know Kingston?
A little bit. I used to live in Richmond, sort of, or Ham.
Oh yeah, Ham. Yeah, because I used to go. So I used to live in Chiswick. I used to get the bus to the studio because before I moved house, I got a bus to the studio in Kingston, and I know the Ham area. I used to go to they used to have like a maker lab in Ham. I think I went there a few times as well. And then you've been doing the podcast. How long have you been doing the podcast as well? Because I know you're on about 220 episodes or something, right?
4 years, just over 4 years.
Wow, that's super cool. Yeah, because I was looking through all the people you've interviewed and stuff. I was thinking, man, that's an amazing amount of people you've managed to talk to as well, like from all variations of, like, you know, people who are well established, people that are just starting, people that are in the middle.
When I was putting my exhibitions on, I'd have students, prisoners, homeless people, as well as them A-listers, you know, and everyone in between. So I thought the podcast should represent that.
It's fascinating as well.
Yeah. So how are you getting on in the new studio? Yeah,
it's really good actually. It's nice to. So before I had a studio, which was it was a great studio actually, because I just needed a studio. So I got a space in about 2019, and I just took the ex-gallery space in this studio block because it was, well, it was available, but it was full of chairs and it was cheaper because I just needed space. And obviously that was amazing for a few years. But then what sort of happened was I started to get quite distracted, you know, because there was a lot of artists working in studios around where the studio was, and obviously, like, as the practice developed to a point where I wanted to just be kind of getting on more, it started to get a bit frustrating. Then obviously lockdown happened, and then I was working from home, and I kind of developed a way of working at home, and I realized that I was much better working kind of on my own, not necessarily solitary, but I do think there's a lot of solitary confinement as when you're an artist. You do find a lot of the time you are just working on your own. And then so I got this new studio, and it's much nicer because it's got a door, which sounds like a mad thing to say, but having a door is a good thing. So now I can just sort of lock myself away and get on really. So yeah, no, I'm getting on really well. It's nice.
Yeah, that is one of the prerequisites is a door.
I know it sounds a bit nuts, doesn't it? It's like, my studio's got a door now, and it was like, what? It's like, yeah, I think when I explain to people, they think I used to have this sort of like outdoor kind of, like, I don't know, like a tarpaulin with a couple of door on it or something. But no, yeah, so it's better now, and it's walking distance from my house now, so it's much more fully fledged. I think I've always I'd never had a studio before, so I was always just working in, like, on tiny little tables and wherever I could find a space, you know, in order to sort of fund getting a studio.
Well, I did go into a lot of studios before Zoom came about, before lockdown.
Oh yeah.
And it's rare to see one with a window, you know.
Yeah, mine's not got a window. My old one did. It was in an atrium, so it was in like the roof, so but they didn't open, so it was absolutely baking and then freezing. But the new one doesn't have a window, so yeah, it's still a luxury, I think, to have a big window that opens.
Yeah, great for tomatoes, but not so good for artists.
No, not so good when you're literally sweating on what you're making. So like you're drawing or whatever, and you're dripping. So you got a little guttering over here, and you try, you know. It wasn't very. In the end, it became not very productive as well, you know.
So now you've not got a window, but you have got a door.
No, I've not got a window, but I've got a door. So maybe the next one will have a window and a door, and then I'll finally feel like I've got a place.
You've made it as an artist.
I've made it then. I mean, I'm a famous artist then. I've got a place then.
Right, and your work.
Yes.
If you're aware, I've got 7 questions that I ask each artist.
Okay. All right.
First of which is, how would you describe what you do to someone that may not know your work?
That's a good question, because that happens a lot when you're out, you know, when you meet people. They're sort of, you say, you know, I make art or an artist, or however you word it, and they go, oh, what sort of work do you make? And it's always that. How do you describe what you make in like a sentence or two? A, to keep people interested, and B, to like actually explain it in a way. So I a lot of the time I say I'll just show you, but I think for the answer to the question, I reckon I'm a sculptor. Say I'm a soft sculptor. So I say I'm like a textile. I'm a textile artist or a seamstress or something like that. I usually use those words, and they sort of say, "Oh, right, so you sew." I say, "Yeah," and then I sort of go along the lines of, first of all, I think with the series I'm making at the moment, the flower presses, I always just say, "Did you ever used to press flowers when you were younger?" And they say a lot. Well, sometimes people say no, sometimes people say yeah. And I say, okay, so you know, you take the flower and you press it between the perspex and the plywood, and you know, create an image like that. And I say, well, essentially, I'm trying to do that through sculpture. So I hand stitch the flowers and I squash them, and then other objects as well. It's not just flowers. And then they sort of go, and that's sort of how I explain it. I sort of say I'm a sculptor. I used to be more of a kinetic sculptor, so I used to make kinetic work, and now I want to sort of explore movement through the static as well as the actual movement. So I think a lot of the work I make looks like it moves, but it doesn't, or it's like a frozen frozen movement in time, sort of, like a photograph. I think I sort of have started to see them as photographs in a way, not actually photography, but they're sort of still images of something. So they were squashed at the point of their prime, or at the point of they're about to die, or at the point, and then that's it. They're like concealed in time, and they're transient, but they're also very permanent. That's kind of, obviously I don't say all that when someone asks me in the pub, because they'd be bored, but I mainly just wake up. I mainly just say I make sort of soft sculpture, and that would be the way I go now, soft sculpture.
And what do they say once you explain your work and you show them your work?
It's very interesting to sort of think about what they would sort of, I mean, it various responses. I think a lot of the time people sort of say, because I hand stitch a lot of it as well. So a lot of it's so I sort of machine. It's all done in components. So each piece was made out, I don't know, about 150 components.
What material is it? Sorry to butt in. What material?
No, that's right.
Is it?
So it's a various materials. So a lot of them are polyurethane coated fabric, which is really lovely to work with because it has the same consistency and texture as an inflatable, like a bouncy castle.
Well, that's what I was about to say. For anyone that doesn't know it, it does look like a deflated inflatable.
Yeah,
that's been squashed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the whole concept around the inflatables. I've been working with inflatables for about 8 years. And then, but I love that the idea of the skin of the inflatable being very similar to, it's not similar to, but I always feel it as if like it's quite similar to the human skin, that particularly an inflatable, it requires air or a life force to keep going. And if it hasn't got it, it just sort of deflates and becomes a big, sack of skin, basically. And it's quite fragile as well as quite strong. And I think that's quite an interesting idea when you think about like the world that we're in. We're kind of these fragile beings going through this quite tough like exterior. Everything's quite industrial and we're kind of soft really on our exterior. So that's why the kind of inflatables have always excited me in that way. But yes, this new stuffed and squashed work are quite, because that's the first thing people say is, how do you get the air to stay in on a squashed inflatable work? And the works that I make for the wall are not inflatable, they're squashed, but they look like they're inflatable. So that's kind of the there's a parallel between some of the larger stuff that is inflatable. I suppose it's about creating an illusion, really.
When I first saw I don't know if you'd call it, I think maquette would be a bit too much of a word, but I was in like an Argos or a Toys R Us or something like that. And I saw the smaller version of the inflatables that they sell. They had them to one side, and they was probably, I don't know, 12 inches square, and it'd be a bouncy castle or a inflatable pool with a slide,
Yeah.
And I remember walking through, seeing them, and I was going, "Oh, they've got maquettes of these little ones," and I was really excited by these little ones that they had on show. Have you have one of those on your Instagram? Is it yours or is it
the one I made? So that one I made is smaller than any one you can buy. So the whole idea was to create the world's smallest bouncy castle. Because obviously, when we think about inflatables, usually the first thing we go to is big. And a lot of times when inflatable art is made, it's big. It's like large versions of things that
Stonehenge.
Yeah, for example. And then so I thought, right, what if I could make a tiny one? And it turns out that it's a lot more difficult to make a small one than a large one. And then now I know more about the production of inflatables. I can understand why, because obviously when you build large ones, you're just stitching together huge sheets that then inflate. But when you're doing really small, it becomes a lot more complicated, with the airflow and things like that. So basically that was an idea that I wanted to create the opposite of what an inflatable would be normally.
Yeah.
And then I sort of tinkered that one into its creation. I didn't really have any sewing experience when I made that, the first bouncy castle. It was more just like fail, try again, getting a massive flap. and then eventually I sort of blew it up and I went, oh, it kind of resembles a bouncy. That's good. And then with a couple of tweaking, it became a piece. And then I sort of refined it over the last few years.
Well, I'd seen you work online for some time, and then I saw it in person when we were both in Thorpe Stavry's factory project.
Yeah.
Summer before last. And yeah, in person, they're a whole completely different thing to what they are online, obviously, when you see the photograph on social media. And I know that I mean, I contacted you recently and asked if you could send me an image of the back of your artwork.
Yeah.
Which I hope you found no disrespect to.
No.
I'm fascinated because I'll always have a look behind an artwork if I'm able, a 2D artwork. If I could call yours 2D for a moment.
Yeah.
And I looked around the back and it was beautifully made on the back as well, which I very much enjoyed. And I've spoke about that a few times, that when I've done talks, pay attention to every detail and used yours as an example of it.
Oh, well, thanks. I think with it, whenever you make something that's even, obviously for the factory, that the pieces were suspended, so I knew that there'd be a 360 kind of viewing experience. But I do think that when you make something that is quite precise, you try and be quite precise, with what you do. And I think that the viewer, every element should have that same element of care, because the viewer likes to look. Well, I do. Like, if I go and see it work, I like to look at every little bit of it. The corners, the sides, the fixings. I love fixings as well. I'm such a nerd. Like, I'll go and look at they've used like a brass wing nut or something, and I'll notice all that stuff. So I just think if I notice it, then other people notice it, and that's where you can get super nerdy with that sort of thing. So I think having like recessed split patterns and things like that is just it's nice.
I agree.
Oh, good.
And just yesterday, I searched for elegant fixings with you in mind, and I'm making something at the moment that is ply based, but again, because of your influence, I wanted to make the back look as good as possible. Elegant and DIY don't really go.
You have to get just flimsy, dainty, lovely little fixings that come in that won't hold anything up the wall. Yeah. No, that's nice, but no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. It's nice that you noticed as well, because that sort of thing is a lot of the time unnoticed, that there's care taken in the backs of the pieces as well.
Did you have creativity in the home growing up?
Yeah. I've always been surrounded by creativity. Really. My dad's a painter. He's an abstract painter, and we always just had. I've just always been surrounded by creativity, like music. The mum and dad introduced me to a lot of music growing up. Like, so I had some. At school, I was always really pushed to do, to work in art and all that sort of thing. I've always been really supported in my art kind of thing growing up. I think I decided quite young that it was what I wanted to do. I played football for years actually, and I was always sort of drawing at the weekends and stuff. And then eventually, I actually thought that doing art was more interesting. But there was never a financial. It was never like, how could I make this? It was always just like, I wonder if this could become a job. I never thought about it as much, and I just kept doing it and refining it, and then made it into a career. But it was just, I was always supported, always grew up creative, and
and a lot of artists, it's funny because so many artists that I've spoken to at a certain point, talking about it being a job, so many of them work for so much less than minimum wage for so many more hours than a weekly job, but perseverance will pay off in the end, hopefully.
Hopefully. I think you got to just keep going. And I think it's all about rhythm. If you stop, then it's very, very difficult to start again, even when you're developing. Not everything you make you'll even like. I think it's just make, and then makes me don't like, and then eventually you'll like it, and then you'll begin to like it a bit more. And I think you can never say that you're at any point where you're happy with it. You're always developing it and changing, and the next piece is always more of a push than the piece you just made. And I suppose it's more of a creative. I don't even want to use the word journey because that sounds awful, but it's more of a creative just thing you do, isn't it? All the time, you just obsessively make, and and if it becomes something that becomes your career, then it that's a bonus.
Yeah, saying about making work that isn't quite working. I've been doing these small drawings that are about they was always about 50 to 70 centimeters. And then I decided to go massive with them. And I don't know if you've seen them. I do them with fine liner. So I'd always done them small because they were so time consuming. And I thought, I'm going to go fucking massive with them. I had a sort of interview with a gallery that might take me on. So I thought, well, I've got to show that there's a bit of something else to them other than these small drawings. So I've done this massive one.
Nice.
And it took me sort of like 8 or 9 hours a day for like 7 days, just doing all these models. And I've stood back of it and I went, oh, that is fucking beautiful. I know it sounds big-headed, but
no, I love that moment, mate. I know the moment. It's so good.
And I've stood back and I've gone, fucking hell, I love it. And then I went, oh, I don't like that bit. And I was like, I'll give yourself a break.
I knew you were going to say that. Because that eureka moment, you go, it's in, it's there, I've done it. And then you, although, hang on, could the whole thing just be a different colour? No, stop, no, stop. No, don't do that.
Yeah, it's like that little, the one on the other shoulder pops up and bursts your bubble, doesn't it?
100%, mate. I think that's absolutely, that's like a curse that everybody gets. But I like that what you said about that moment where, you know, when you're working so delicately on something and then you step back and finally you see it as the big thing it's supposed to be in. Your first reaction is either like, shit, I've messed that up, or yes, I'm in. And that whatever that is, like, that's where you should roll. I think that's nice.
Yeah, don't listen to that little prick on the other shoulder.
Yeah. Because if you look at something for too long, that little prick, he'll tell you that there's something wrong, and you'll end up changing the whole thing. Yeah, I've done that so many times. Where I've took a picture of a piece of work, and then I've sort of changed it so many times, and I've gone home and I've laid in bed and I've looked at the original picture and gone, I shouldn't have changed it. It was good 2 days ago. Why have you done that now? Yeah. No, 100%. That's so funny.
Well, when I'm giving like workshops and stuff, and the people ask me, even artists who are established say to me, like, you know, when do I think an artwork is finished? And I just say, well, look, when it comes to that point that we're talking about, when you go, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
Fucking sign it.
No, that is finished.
Signed it. That's it. It's job.
Yeah, it's finished. It's finished. Like your whole, what you're making and your whole, you know, that's not finished. But the whole, if you make to do it, sign it, because then it's done. Even if there's something on there you don't like, a lot of the time, no one else will notice what you don't like as well. You know, like you see people and go, yeah, it's cool, but don't look down there because there's something I don't know. No one will notice that. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's just like, you know. Yeah. So that is when it's finished, because there's this, isn't there? It's like a lot of musicians have it where they can't finish a piece of music. They just keep composing and changing it. I can't remember who it is, but I think I heard someone. I think it might be Radiohead. Tom York. He just keeps. He's such a genius that he keeps changing it to the point where they're like, right, we need to finish this track, because we just keep making music and it can't be finished. So I think at some point, you have just got to go, right, it's done, next, move on, it's finished. Let's do the next one.
Well, I listened to a podcast with, do you know Gary Delaney, the comedian?
I think, I've heard of him, actually.
He's a one-liner, and he's very much the comedian's comedian, you know.
Right, okay, yeah.
And he was saying that when he was on Live at Apollo, there was like 3,500 people in the crowd, but there was one person that he could see that wasn't laughing as much as the others.
Right.
And he saw the whole night as a fucking failure because he was focusing on that person.
Yeah.
And then he was trying to make that person laugh. He'd already got the other 3,500 in the crowd, but he was concentrating on this person in the third row back or whatever, you know.
Just really looking stern at him, just staring him down.
And he was saying like it was as if it was a failure. And no one in the world saw that person other than him.
But it ruined his whole psyche.
Yeah,
and he couldn't, no, I can see that. Yeah,
Here's a question I asked everyone, Ant. Which piece that you've created has got the strongest emotional connection?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I think that we were talking about the bouncy castle earlier. I think I think all the work I'm making at the moment has a strong personal connection, because I think I'm really aware of kind of nostalgia as both a nice thing and a kind of scary thing, you know. And I think one of my biggest fears is time. I know that sounds a bit nuts, but I think, you know, it's something that's always moving and always, you know, it's always moving into one place, which sounds a bit morbid. But so I think a lot of the work I'm making now is about kind of trying to slow that down and like creating a moment where things are just frozen in time within their beauty, you know. And I think that the bouncy castle and the pressed flowers are both really resonant of that, particularly the bouncy castle, in that it was the kind of thing that you associate very much with childhood. But as you get older, you know, you're less interested in, I suppose you're more interested in having commodities, more interested in a lot of the time. I mean, obviously people go traveling and obviously people are more interested in experience a lot of the time. I understand that. But, you know, it's a lot of things, it's like things, suddenly you get stuff, you know, you get a house, you get objects, you get a car, and all of a sudden that your priorities change from just pure all out fun into, you need to kind of adult a bit now. So you kind of, you have objects and you have things that you place value on, whereas when you're younger, you place value on a lot of different things, and now you place value on different. So making a tiny bouncy castle and putting it in a locked box is kind of my way of sort of understanding that I am now an adult, and I do need to now think about various different things in a different way. And I think the same with the flower presses as well. I suppose we're always trying to contain things and own things, whereas when we're young, we don't really think about that, because everything sort of just plays out for us, don't it? So I think that the work I'm making now is the most resonant to me personally. I think that's why I'm really enjoying making it.
Well, the work I've seen of yours has only been the plastic looking material.
Yeah.
I get the reaction that you're trying to evoke, that nostalgic fun element, and seeing it squashed down. And I've seen a few bouncy castles when they've come out the box or out the van.
Yeah.
They are very creased up, literally had the life sucked out of them.
Yeah.
And when you see a bouncy castle coming to life, and it might take 5 minutes to be inflated.
Yeah.
Just as we was talking there, I was thinking about, the stop motion when they show you a seed, and it you see it working its way through the dirt over a matter of months, and then it flourishes and then dies again. Have you ever thought about doing a stop motion with one of yours being inflated, and then deflating again? Yeah.
It's funny you should ask about the stop motion, because years ago I made a piece. It was one of the first pieces I ever made. I made it in about 2015. It was called the Boost Project. Basically what it is it was like a 5 meter by 5 meter inflatable ball that was suspended, and it had its own Facebook, Instagram and Twitter accounts. Nice. And as in, it acted as a person on these accounts. If you could follow it, you could tweet it, you could like it, and every time it received an interaction, it injected a little bit of air into it. So the more it was talked about, and the more it became like this popular thing, the bigger and bigger and bigger it got, until it became this massive swollen thing in this space. And what we did was we filmed it as a time lapse over a period of about 2 days. And the footage is amazing, because it just sort of becomes this. Yeah, like you say, it almost looks like it could have been staged, because it's like really staggered, like kind of up, down, like that, and it just keeps going like that. And what you basically get is this video of a lung. And it takes on this completely different form. And then it really, because I was talking earlier about how it's the inflatable, I find it quite similar to a human being, human body. And when you look at a stop motion of a inflatable going up and down, it really does kind of make you feel about like how we breathe, and the rhythm of breath, and the rhythm of a heartbeat. And it really made me, and I think maybe that stop motion actually became what I took from that piece moving forwards, was that idea of a breathing lung, and you turn a blower on and off, and it can open and close. It can make things, it can make things move. And I've used that again in other works, that opening and closing. I made the giant daisies in the restaurant in London. They open and close throughout the day. Again, it's that symbol of life. And
I wasn't aware of that. Sorry.
Oh yeah, so there's a piece of work in a restaurant in Paddington. It's called Bloom. It's a 7 meter long daisy chain that opens its petals and closes them every sort of hour and 45 minutes. It's to symbolize the kind of birth of a new day, because daisies will open their heads every morning and close them at night, very similar to humans again. So this whole thing is about anthropomorphism, really. Is kind of giving human characteristics to stuff that doesn't have them, or finding human characteristics in objects and materials.
And we all do that.
We all do that all the time. Even if you look at something and it looks like it's got eyes, like you see them hooks that look like an octopus that wants to fight you, those sort of things, So like making visual metaphors that kind of explore the human in the fragile and the not so fragile way. I think that's what's exciting to me. That's why I've been making what I've been making over the last sort of 8 years in various capacities. It's all about that, the kind of shifting enthusiasm of just being alive. Really.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I apologise for having an idea that you had several years ago.
Well, no, I could do it again. I should explore it a bit more, I think.
And if there was you and 5 other artists, past and present, what would your ideal group show be?
Mate, what a question! Oh my god, my ideal group show. Oh, that's a mad question. Okay, let me think. I'd probably have everyone coming in to. Do you remember John Cage's 433, which is like that, just that silent piece? So basically, John Cage composed a piece of music. It's 4 minutes 33 seconds long. Of
yes,
complete silence. I've always talked about. I always reference that piece because I just find it hilarious, but brilliant as well. So I think that everyone would walk into that because it's awkward, and there's nothing more awkward than just total silence when you're first meeting people. And then, oh mate, I don't even know. I think it would be probably a sculpture show, to be honest. Probably some Bruce Nomans. Nice. Oh my God, it's very hard. It's very, very hard. I'd probably have some contemporary work in there, actually, as well. There's a lot of very, very, very good contemporary painters. So I'm very, very much influenced in musicians as well as artists. You know, I've always kind of found a lot of inspiration through musicians more than artists a lot of the time, actually. You know, I think in history, I'd love to be around the table with people like Nick Cave, you know, Patti Smith, people like that, people that were very, very poetic in their time, but also produced really visually beautiful work as well. And then in the visual art wise, definitely Bruce. I think it's funny, isn't it? Because the work and the person are two very different things. You know, like to have them around the dinner table might not be very good dinner people, but they might make really interesting work. You know,
Bruce Nauman, he sent me a catalogue and a letter while I was away.
Really?
Yeah.
No way. How did it get round that? How did that even come about?
When the big artists in the UK started writing to me, I used to get The Guardian on a Sunday or Saturday, one of the two, and there'd be the gallery listings every week in there.
Right.
So I would write a letter to the gallery or to the artist via the gallery. And then I'd done one to him and Cindy Sherman.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Both of whom replied with a catalogue. Wow. And Bruce Nauman sent me, it was more like, the old annuals you used to get.
Yeah, yeah.
It was more like one of those than a catalogue, you know.
Wow.
And
like an almanac.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't heard of him, but when I'm getting these catalogues from Sarah Lucas, for instance, and they're talking about Bruce Nauman or whomever, then I'll write that name down and go, right, so I don't know that, because I knew nothing about art at this point. I'm learning what these other artists are telling me. So I'm just fucking absorbing everything and writing to anyone, because I don't know if they're on the second rung of the ladder or off the scale.
Yeah.
They mean nothing to me.
But that's nice that you had no filter. You could just ping off anything. It wasn't like there was any hierarchy. You just pinged off whoever you wanted to talk to.
Well, even the ones I was writing to, the only artists I knew of at that point was Sarah Lucas, Tracy Emin, because she was Tracy Emin.
Yeah,
same
cool.
with Damien Hirst.
Yeah.
And the only other artist I knew from that ilk was Marcus Harvey, because he'd done the Myra Hindley, which was...
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, that famous.
So
yeah.
It was them three out of that lot were the only ones I knew, and I didn't know how famous they were. I just figured they were famous because they was in the papers or they was in this big exhibition that was on the news at the time. And it wasn't until like they was, I'd have them back from Rachel Whiteread and Anthony Gormley and all of this sort of thing, which they were just names I didn't know. And then once you realise, you go, all right, so they
wow. Yeah. Oh God, I went to his. I've been to a couple of his shows, but I went to his. He had a tape room a few years ago, and it's just.
To that also.
I just find him fascinating, like his variety of his materials as well. The way that he'll, some of it will be neon, then you'll just get like a rotating ceramic animal sculpture, and then you get a video of someone just washing their hands for. I just think the whole thing is so. I just think it's beautiful. Actually, he's become definitely my favourite over the years. I think.
And he's just a solitary artist who works in his studio on a ranch in the middle of nowhere.
Just gets on with it, I think I always think that it's very similar actually to someone like Leonard Cohen, because he's someone that I've always sort of loved as well. And he was a total recluse, just wrote and sang, and he has such a variety of. A lot of people say, "Oh, every Leonard Cohen song sounds the same," but they don't. If you actually listen to it,
I'm very much with you with Leonard Cohen.
You know what I mean? Everyone's sort of, it's just the same. It's not actually. If you really listen, it's not. It's a story. It's a story, and it's completely everything's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, not beautiful. A lot of it's really perverted and messed up, but that's also beautiful. In what he's talking about. So. But yeah, I think Noman is a fascinating character, and I think Kusama's a fascinating character. And the fact that she is still. Have you seen all that new stuff she's been doing with Louis Vuitton?
Yeah, I've not seen it physically, only online. And when there's the massive brands and artists working together, I'm always a little bit
It's always a bit strange, isn't it? I think that obviously Kusama kind of gets away with it because although it's a big brand, it's still very much Kusama's work. It's not like she's reappropriated any of their. I don't think she's really gone down the route of doing much. It's still her, it's still just her doing the dots and all that. And I mean, it's I mean, whatever you think about it, it's okay. But it's more to the fact that she's still killing it. Like it's still everywhere. Everyone still fully knows Kusama, and
I thought amongst the artists that you might mention, Klaus Oldenburg might have been.
Well, I love Oldenburg. I literally studied him for years, Oldenburg, with the large scale, the large scale kind of apple and the fruit and the all the stuff, even the inflatable, the soft sculpture on the wall. And I definitely an influence of Oldenburg, really. I think I find it quite difficult to think of people, to sort of on the spot work it out, because I think you sort of, you've just got all these influences running around in your head, like, where have I seen that? What have I seen? I'm not very good with like a lot of time with names and things like that. It's more just like, I like that. I'll put that in that folder there and I'll copy that. And I think influence comes from a lot of places as well. I'm really interested in magic, a lot old stagecraft magic, which is a kind of a bit of a odd influence, really. But it was something that really made me start thinking about like the illusion and the viewer experience. So a lot of my influence comes from that kind of era as well, rather than just I mean, I'm interested in artists, and I think when you go through art school and stuff, you're told that your influences should be artists. But I think a lot of mine are wider than that a lot of the time.
How would it be if yours was made of rubber, like a balloon? When it's pressed and you inflate it, it will just fucking try and squeeze out the sides, wouldn't it? Like a warm pack of butter or something,
Yeah, it's very interesting actually, because I think so with rubber you have this. So years ago I tried the first test of the inflatable I made I had the social media, it was actually made out of a weather balloon. So it was a balloon, and I connected it to like an air compressor, and I inflated it and deflated it and I was like, right, I've sorted it. I've made it. This piece works.
That's that.
And then it blew up because rubber, even synthetic latex, has a like a lifespan. You can only inflate it and deflate it so many times, and it just blow up. So, but for a balloon, you couldn't use a balloon because a balloon will just naturally, like even for example, when you have a party, you have a balloon. Within a few days, it just looks really sad and it's on the floor, and it's just like eventually it's just all shriveled. So I think that like the air will escape like a lot, pretty much all the time, unless it's like heat sealed, like bubble wrap or packing, things like that. Yeah. But even then, I think eventually it will escape. So I think air is, if you made like a sealed air thing, eventually the air will go out of it. And I think that's why it has to be stuffed not with air, because eventually you'll end up with literally just a flat bit of, But for experimental purposes, it'd be very interesting to try something like that, something that has a more organic, something that actually just expanded around the edges and, do what it looked like, yeah.
If you wasn't an artist, what do you think you'd like to be?
It's a good question. Oh my God, that's a good question. So when I was growing up, I wanted to be a footballer, obviously. And then, but that was I decided not to do that when I got a bit older. If I wasn't an artist, what would I like to do? I've always had this idea of being a fireman. Nice. I've always wanted to do something in the services like a fireman. I don't know why. I think that's probably what I'd do. I just want to help. I think I like helping people. I think that's probably what I'd do.
That was always a good fascination from kids. As you said, footballer there. The most often, the most regular answer I get on this from the guys is footballer, rock star, or musician, But fireman as a kid, that was a... I always wanted to do that. Yeah, that would definitely be the other thing. I think the more I think about it, I've been asked that question before, and I always say that. And anything coming up?
It's quite this year's really busy. I'm really working towards some interesting stuff. I've got I'm doing a couple of fairs overseas, and then I've got a solo show in Madrid in October.
Nice.
Which is really exciting. So basically I'm in just a production period right now, just producing the pieces for. So the first fair is in May. And then there's a show in May as well. So it's May and then October. So, just very much production at the moment.
What fair is that?
So it's Art Busan in Korea.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which I'm really excited to do. So I'll be doing that with a gallery I've just started working with. And then I'm doing a group show with a gallery that I've been working with for a while, Musi, as well. And then, the solo in October is with the new gallery as well.
When you said Korea, it's just obvious that they love bright, bold objects, don't they?
Yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to see how the works work there. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how it all fits within the context of the fair and within the other pieces that are being shown there and things like that. Yeah, so yeah, I'm just excited to see how it all pans out. Really, it's all just exciting, actually. Yeah.
And have you done any work with any of those before?
No, this is new. So last year I did the Cannes Art Fair in Ibiza. That was the first proper art fair I'd done actually last year, and then so this year is a different one. So the whole the art fair, moving into art fairs, it's a really new thing, and it's really cool. I'm in a very exciting period. We just want to keep making the work and making each piece. And
how do you find presenting your work at an art fair? Because it's very different to taking it to a curator in a gallery and then placing it, or even if you place it yourself in a gallery and then pretty much walk away from it. It's a completely different entity to standing there next to your artwork. And
yeah, it's very different. It's almost like the connotations of a group show as well, isn't it? It's very different in a group show scenario to a solo show scenario, because you're playing off other people's works, so I think there's I think the curation of the space is super important, in that the works still have their own room to sort of breathe, but they also relate to the other works in the show. So I think it's very interesting in that setting, like fairs and group shows, to see how they both work and contradict each other, and how that can that's the success of a group show, isn't it? If the show on the whole is a piece, in its own right, if it's a curatorial work of art, that's kind of how it will. So yeah, it's just very interesting to see it all, and it'd be really cool. Like, I'm not going, unfortunately, so I won't be able to, but I'll see the images and stuff. So yeah, really, yeah, it'd be fun.
Did you go to the one in Ibiza?
I did. First time I've ever been to Ibiza.
Did, yes.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, no, I did. Yeah, that was amazing. Yeah, I've never been to Ibiza before, and managed to go to. I just thought Ibiza was going to be like just club, like just insane, like the whole time. But it's not actually. It's a lovely, lovely, lovely place. There's a lot of really, really lovely bays and beaches and stuff in Ibiza, which was not what I thought at all. I actually really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean the bit everyone has got the idea of is that one little bit of town, isn't it? And pretty much.
Yeah, it's like there's a whole area which is all just like clubs and pub. Like the whole thing is just like full on the whole time, and I just thought the whole island would be like that. But I was like beautifully mistaken. It's a really lovely place.
It is beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And where would anyone find you, Ant? Be it social media or website?
Yeah, mainly Instagram. I think I've got a website which is more of a sort of fleshed out Instagram, really. But Instagram's the main thing. Yeah, just at Ant Hamlyn, my handle. Yeah, that's probably the best place, really, because that's where the first things go, and then the website will give you. There's a link on there for a website which gives you more information on each piece and what's coming up and all that.
Brilliant. Well, that's all my questions asked, mate. Thank you very much for your
mate. I've had such a good time. This has been great. Thanks. I've enjoyed the conversational element of it. I didn't want it to be just like interview. So that's great. Thanks.
Well, hope you enjoyed that episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. So we wasn't dictated to by advertisers. We decided from the offset to go ad-free, which means obviously we had to self-fund. So we set up the Ministry of Arts Patreon page. And without that support, we would not be able to produce this podcast. So if you like what you hear and you're able to support the podcast, just go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile. You'll find a Linktree drop-down box, which will direct you straight to our Patreon page. And for the price of a cup of coffee, you can help keep us growing week by week. But if you're not able to do that, that's fine, because this content is free for everyone. But leaving a review on whichever platform you listen to your podcast, that really does help us get noticed, and anyone else looking for an art podcast. Or even giving us a positive shout out on your social media. Everything is appreciated. But either way, thanks for listening, and until next week, ta-da.